So I'm Robin Kerner, and this is my good friend, and maybe it's not too formal to say colleague, Ismain Ayoaz. And Ismain, I butchered your name, or have I got it right? Did I get it
No,
pretty right?
you did it very good, actually.
So
A lot of
anybody,
people,
go ahead.
a lot of people butcher my name the first time, but you got used to it, so you know how to say
That's
it.
right. Yeah. So now anybody listening to this will notice that there are two folks speaking here who are not American born, but we're both American citizens. So I'm the Brit and he's the Frenchman. And we've been working together on a few things over the years, but most recently and indeed presently on humanitarian, which is what we're going to be talking about in this conversation, in this video. And the reason, by the way, that Ismain is the one with the website, the humanitarian website displayed behind him, is he's the man that built the website. That is a skill I do not have, and Ismain evidently does have. And I've said to him thank you many times privately, but let me say publicly on this video, thank you, Ismain, because without you, there would be no humanitarian.us website, as well you know. So thank you for everything you are doing for humanitarian. I really appreciate it. But there's a particular reason we decided to have this chat, right, Ismain? And to record it. And it's to my mind, a very good reason. Well, you know what? I think at this point, I will hand over to you. Why don't you say what prompted the conversation that we recently had, that I said, you know what, we should be recording this. Where did that come from?
Well, I think it comes from the fact that being a humanitarian, declaring yourself humanitarian, it's much more than just saying it. It's when you take a look at what's going on in our country right now, humanitarian comes with a lot of principles and values, and it's very hard. It can be very hard for people, for me, to be a good humanitarian. As you mentioned before, it's a bit like a religion. You need to work on it every day to get closer to being a humanitarian, like you have to work every day to be a Christian, a good Christian. And so I think that conversation was prompted because I was asking you, okay, but look, people are on social media are like how can I say that, destroying each other. They are mad at each other. They can't have a discussion anymore. And sometimes as a human being, it's hard for me to be a humanitarian, and how do I apply all those principles for each and every situation that I'm facing when I'm sharing my opinions on Facebook. And so we started that conversation, and we thought that it would be a good idea to maybe have people listening to us and sharing these insights.
Yeah, exactly. And since you mentioned religion, and you actually mentioned specifically Christianity, I just want to clarify that a bit or expand on that. When we had that conversation earlier, I mentioned religion because I wanted to make the point that if, for example, you're a Christian, just because you fail to meet perfectly the standards of Christianity, the standards you purport to follow or to try to follow, that doesn't mean all of a sudden you are no longer a Christian. That doesn't mean all of a sudden it's all pointless, or that you should give up, or indeed that you can no longer claim adherence to those standards. You claim that you are trying to adhere to those standards, but also acknowledging that, as you just said, you're human and that you fail. Doesn't make the standards any less useful as guiding posts or more. So that was where that comment came from, wasn't it? So when we spoke about this a few days ago, Ismain, there were a few particular difficulties or experiences that you've had trying to be humanitarian and feeling very bad because you feel that in these experiences you failed the standards of humanitarian or something. Can you go over a few of those with me, and let's talk about them a bit and what thus to do.
Yeah, so for the context and for the benefit of people listening to us, you and I, we've been working on the humanitarian project for a couple of years now. You, me, and a couple of other people, we've been working on that with that, yeah, for at least 2 years. And so humanitarian for me, it's it's something that I completely believe in, and it's almost like a second religion for me. You know, as you know, I'm an elected official here in my city, and it's important for me to be able to share what I think about politics in a way that's going to bring people together. And recently I reached out to you because I thought that I was like failing the humanitarian. I was like very distressed, to be honest, because I've put so much work in it, and as I was taking a look at the document information you sent me, how we should be doing when we have conversation on social media. After reading that list of do's and don't do, I was like very concerned that my experience and what I was doing on social media was not always reflecting what you offered and what it is to be a humanitarian. And I started second guessing myself and like, am I a humanitarian? I've been working so hard on this project. I believe in it strongly, but in the meantime, it feels like the way I say things on social media are completely going to the opposite of the do's and don'ts that you offered. And so that's where it's coming from. That I think that conversation was sparked from that, to the fact that I started second guessing myself, and I was like, yeah, what I'm doing. But then eventually you and I, we discussed, and I realized it's not easy to be a humanitarian, but at the end it's all about trying to get closer to what the humanitarian values and principles are. It's trying to do your best, and it's also when you're on social media to always trying to not making assumptions or insinuation, or giving people the benefit of the doubt, not judging them. And I've been trying to do that, but sometimes it's hard because, as you said, we are human beings, we have emotions, we have feelings, and when you are like me, you have a strong sense of justice, and you see some injustice being done on social media, you sometimes let your emotions taking the best of you. So I think this is where all of this came from.
And there's no better reason to be emotional in the political space than witnessing an injustice. It should make us emotional. Injustice really is the bottom line of what we all need to stand up against. And I think so. It's a very reasonable problem to have if it is a problem. I think when you told me that earlier, one of the things I might have responded with is, yeah, that all makes sense. But the question to always ask oneself when one piles in a conversation on social media or anywhere else is, okay, but what good is this venting that I'm doing here, or this making a statement about this issue right here, right now, going to do? What good is it actually going to do? Is it actually going to serve the cause of justice? Or is it just going to land where it's not really invited, and therefore either do nothing at best, or at worst, put people who maybe are on the wrong side of this issue defensive, to get them to pile in? And then, because what you give energy to, you make bigger, right? And sometimes I think it's a hard lesson. As someone that, as you know, has been dealing in political communication and psychology for years, I find myself saying, perhaps surprisingly often, that often the best thing to do is just nothing. Just nothing. Keep the powder dry, because a lot of very right and maybe righteous opinions that we have, the impact of sharing them will change utterly with where and when we choose to share them. The same words used uninvited can have no impact or a negative impact. that at another time, when they're invited, when they're solicited, could have a very positive impact. So I think for those of us who want to increase justice in the world, change the world for the better, we just need to kind of check each time, right? Check in with ourselves, just ask that question. Okay, this thing I'm about to say right now, right here, what's that likely to do? Do I at least have a reasonable expectation that the world's going to be better as a result? And I think often for a lot of us, especially a lot of us who don't have a lot of power or a lot of money or a big platform, usually saying something, offering an unsolicited opinion doesn't do much good. I'm not saying you should never do it, but usually it doesn't do much good. Usually it's just serving one of our own emotional purposes, I think. Oh, I can't hear you, Ismay.
I'm sorry. I'm going to take my personal example, but I know that I'm extremely involved on social media and talking about politics, because for me, it's not only a way to improve my eloquence and my my writing in English, as someone who's been speaking English for a little bit more than a decade, but it's also a way for me to get closer to the truth and have my opinions, beliefs, principles, ideas being challenged. And to me, it's the right way, especially in this era, COVID, where it's very difficult. It's been very hard for me before to have kind of exchange like this. But with COVID, it's even more difficult to have face-to-face conversation about things. And so, to me, the importance of being able to share my opinions, everything I have in my mind about politics and what's going on in our country. It's a way to grow and learn. And one of the humanitarian principles is, we want to get closer to the truth by listening to opposite opinions and opposite ideas and thoughts. And I have learned a lot, but I think one can learn even more by using the right techniques that humanitarians offers to engage people in the conversation and make sure that people don't come to the defensive. I'm going to give you an example. It's no secret that I'm a much more libertarian, classical liberal, and on cultural issues, I'm much more leaning to the right. So a lot of times I've been criticizing the left, and one of the things that I've been doing too many times is, instead of saying some of the left or some people on the left, not trying to generalize and put everybody in the same bag. I used to say the left and make a general statement, and that can be very offensive for some people and doesn't help to create I would say, I don't like this word, but a safe space for people coming and trying to discuss the issue. It
doesn't facilitate dialogue.
It doesn't facilitate dialogue. And one of the things also I've noticed is that then people have tendency to start being more personal instead of really discussing the argument. Then they start like talking more personal, which doesn't help also to facilitate the discussion when people start getting personal and using innuendos and ad hominems and stuff like this. So to me using social media, it's very important, and that's who I am.
I think, so you've explained it, laid out a good reason to share opinions on social media, and going in with kind of an active learning mentality, which is very, very humanitarian. It's interesting that maybe, well, you tell me, maybe remembering that consciously before you start in a Facebook post that then gets a reaction and then you want to react, maybe like reminding yourself of that in those exact terms might make it easier to not be defensive or reactive when what you put out there gets some kind of response. Like remembering the purpose, what's the bigger purpose here? But you also said, and that, which is definitely true, that engaging with some of the in a way that manifests some of the humanitarian principles of discourse can give you all of that benefit without that downside, right? Give you all of that benefit in a way that also facilitates dialogue. So, for example, if you want to elicit somebody's opinions that may differ from yours about an issue, instead of stating your position, you can always ask them a question. And you can make those questions, you can increasingly ask questions that may get more specific or deeper to the issue. You can challenge them on their view without ever really having to lay out your own. And also your point about, instead you used to say the left, and then now you're right to say maybe some people on the left to make the statement rather than a false overgeneralization, an accurate generalization. It's worth pointing out that you never even have to say the left. If you're talking about a certain behavior, you can just say some people, blah, 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 or a certain view, some people, blah, blah, blah. Why even use the tribal word? Again, that puts people in that space. So that's worth thinking about. And also, you don't even have to talk about people at all often, right? You know, one of the things about one of the humanitarian principles of discourse, or rules of engagement, as we call them, is to judge ideas without judging people. And an extreme form of that is to only talk about the ideas and never talk about the people who have them. So you can say of even mentioning people who believe, you can say, I've been engaging, this idea or this belief, and I have an issue with it. Or what do you think about it, right? The word people never has to appear. And these sound like small things. Maybe they sound even a little almost pedantic, but psychologically they make a huge difference. And as I think you've discovered, right? You're quiet again.
I did discover that. Yeah, I'm muting my video because there's some kids around. So, but yes, no, I discovered that, and it's, again, as I said, especially when you are someone who, every day I'm learning new words in English. So it might be more easy. It might be easier for people who were born in this country whose English is, eloquent, but I always take the time to write what I want to say. But I'm a straight shooter. I'm from France. I'm saying things the way they come to my mind, but I always try to be humanitarian. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. I put stuff, and I realize later on, sometime too late, that I should have known better. I could have done better. But
can you go ahead.
Yeah, as I said, I wanted to say that being humanitarian, it's I think it's an empirical process, right? You learn as you go, as you try, as you work on it. The more I'm going to be challenging myself out there, trying to be a humanitarian, the more I'm going to try. I'm going to make mistakes, but I think what I realized discussing with you is that making mistakes it's going to happen. How do I learn from those mistakes to not repeat them, to get closer to what I try to achieve? Bringing people together when I'm putting my political opinion out there. And even if people are not disagree, at least we can disagree without, hating each other.
Yeah. Or maybe more generally, without increasing distrust, or to disagree even in a way that increases trust. And some of those principles of humanitarian discourse allow us to do that, right? It's possible to have a discussion where two people don't agree, but in the course of that discussion, you find the points in common, or the fundamental values maybe that lie under the disagreement that actually you share. So it's actually possible to have political disagreements whilst getting closer to someone and building trust, which, in this day and age seems pretty remarkable to say, but that's definitely true. Are there any specific things that you've heard me say or read, in the humanitarian rules of engagement, or that document that I sent you that I will post on the blog shortly, that you find particularly challenging or difficult, or you want to talk about right now?
I would say that all the don'ts were challenging, because I was doing and I'm still doing a lot of them. So a lot, I mean, most of them, if not all of them, are, you know, are difficult. You know, when I'm going to give you an example, you know, so just an example among many others. You know, with the censorship from big tech. I hear something now a lot, which is to me ironic and a bit hypocritical, but I know we're not here to talk about political issues, but it's as an example. A lot of, there's this idea that now people who didn't believe before in the idea of a free market with less, you know, government intervention in markets. Now that we see big tech having this huge power to censor, you know, politicians, people who might have different opinions than the mainstream media narrative, those people are being censored. And now people who before didn't believe in the idea of a free market are telling us, oh, it's all about the free market. You know, those are private companies, et cetera, et cetera. And it's difficult for me, from someone like me, to not mention that the left, people on the left,
some people on the left,
but I would say that it's part of the left ideology to not believe in free market where there's less government intervention and stuff like this. Now it's they are all about, you know, those are, you know, the big tech censoring people are private enterprise. It's their private property and they should be able to do whatever they want. And it's difficult for me to not mention and to not be tribal as one of the don'ts. Don't be tribal. You know, don't judge ideas but not people. But how can you do that where clearly, you know, I've some people commenting on my Facebook profile telling, I know that they are on the left, maybe sometime on the extreme left, and now they just like suddenly they became pro free market, and it's hard to not think of the hypocrisy of this, and
yes.
And I want to say it, but
yeah, of course. Well, look, it is. This is. I love it. This is a great example. So I'm glad. I mean, good one for bringing this up, right? Because we all, including me, the first thing we feel is the hypocrisy. The first thing we feel it in our gut, right? And but then the question, and because you talked about being someone, and I know this is particularly true of you, Ismay, you're someone that feels injustice deeply. And hypocrisy is a kind of a form of spoken injustice, isn't it? It's kind of a form of injustice in communication. So yes, of course, it's the first thing we see. But then I would say, okay, what do we want to achieve then? Because here's somebody who's now using something that we care about to make a point. You've got an open door there, and you get to choose what you focus on. Because what you focus on, what you respond with is what will get bigger. So you can respond to the hypocrisy and increase the division, or you can say, oh, it's really interesting to hear you talk about private property rights in this context, blah, blah, blah. Like take that thing and like walk away almost from the issue around which the hypocrisy exists, and use the hook, that little bit of common ground that wasn't there, to expand that. You now can, what has happened in that situation is the person who might have been your political opponent has now invited you to reach them on ground that you were never invited to reach them on before. They're open to an idea that, because of context, there is hypocritical motivation, but because of context, nevertheless, you have a way in. You can now have a conversation where the defense isn't up, your opponent's defense isn't up to an idea that you now in that moment can expand on. And that is a moment of potential persuasion, by the way, as well as common ground, because moments of common ground are moments of potential persuasion. They are the same thing. So what do we do? So we can build a bridge, but only if we stay quiet about that hypocrisy. Now, that doesn't mean we support it or we allow it or we think it's acceptable. maybe even when we've built the bridge of trust, we might point it out. But let's wait until that moment where pointing it out will help, not hinder what we're trying to achieve.
So I think this is probably the way to go. But in the case I was explaining to you, that individual was clearly trying to win an argument, I think, by using something that I know she didn't believe in, right? And so it's difficult to find common ground with someone that you don't think is genuine in its.
This isn't a great for saying this is getting more and more useful, because this leads us to another point, which is fundamental in finding common ground and indeed in being able to persuade others, which is sometimes the best thing to do is simply walk away. And if you can't trust the sincerity of the person you're talking to, in almost every case, you should walk away. Because if the person isn't sincerely engaged, then no good can come of that. And there are billions of other people out there with whom you can spend your time. And I dare say, from whom you would learn more, to go back to your original motivation. See, the problem with doing this on social media is often that simply you don't get to choose the sincerity of the person who's going to respond, the quality of their thinking, the degree of knowledge you're going to be met with. So I think that overt disagreement, I'm an academic dean at the John Locke Institute. We do overt disagreement all the time as a way to expand, a bit critical thinking ability. So I'm all for it, but it makes sense, but it's only going to work when you're kind of in the right environment with the right people. That's a lot more selective than, your Facebook wall, typically speaking, right? Typically speaking. But it's a good point.
I think also but the reality is that a lot of people don't have the luxury to find themselves in the right environment to discuss these issues, right? And many of us, not only in the US, but everywhere in the world, are using social media to be able to connect and some of us are even waiting for getting a response and answers to our posts in forms of comments. So unfortunately, we have to deal with that. We have to deal with the fact that I have to deal with the fact that when I'm going to put something out there, most people commenting are always the same, but I might have from time to time someone that I don't know who has never engaged with me, who might be in my friend list, that is going to say something, and that person might be genuine, sincere, or might be not. I would say that most of the time I get people that I think are sincere, but from time to time you get people who just want to twist your word and make a point or even hurt you with something that you believe, and as I said, using the free market idea, stuff like this. And so what I think is that humanitarian, it's fantastic way to engage people and to have civil discussion, but it's a two-way street. It's difficult to be humanitarian when you have someone discussing with you or even challenging your beliefs and opinions that doesn't want to be humanitarian. And I think I agree with you that if something like this happens, you just need to walk away and say, you know what, there's no point discussing with you. It's just a waste of my time.
Yeah, I think you're right. And salesmen say you've got to give some to get some. But it's hard work, right? It's hard work to be treating someone with decency, civility, and open-mindedness when you're not getting it back. It takes time. However, it's time not well spent with someone who's insincere. But what you can do on Facebook, of course, is you can make that call. Make the call between those who are responding, maybe not, let's say, in a humanitarian way, but at least sincerely, and those who are not. That's a call that we need to make. I was reminded as you were saying that of a great, I don't know where I heard this, this little idiom, I guess. It's not the person that throws the first punch who starts the fight. It's the person who throws the second. And that goes to the walking away, right? Because, there are people who use communication, especially in politics, and this is what humanitarian is completely the opposite of, to condescend, to put down, to divide, etc. When you see somebody doing that, when you reasonably see that's the intent, don't throw the second punch. The first punch can just land, you walk away. And I think, so I guess in a way that's a meta humanitarian rule, right? You only communicate according to the humanitarian rules when there's any point communicating, right? And that does go to a reasonable assessment of intent of the person that you're speaking with. And I've got to say, as you know, I've been writing political articles for many years. I've written hundreds. And it can be people will comment constructively and destructively, whether or not they agree. And you learn as a writer, but it's the same on social media, that no good will come of a sincere response to an insincere comment designed just to distort, intimidate, condescend, or whatever. It's hard because of those human instincts that that we're talking about here, but because it's so unfair. It's so unfair. When you see somebody do that, you want to put it right. Natural instinct. And it's worth saying, and maybe it's a good place to round this video out. In a way, one of the principles of humanitarian is the only legitimate ends of politics are people. What that means is that a legitimate end of politics is righting wrongs, right? Justice is an end of politics, but achieving justice through politics is not the same thing as it were, reacting to every injustice committed in a communication in response to something I said. They're two very different things, and it's hard to remember that, but it's true.
It is very hard. I really what I can say to wrap up this video is humanitarian have changed the way I've put myself on social media and even out there. As an elected official, it helped me a lot as well to also have that a better skills to listen to people. I think that also to be a good humanitarian, you need to be able to listen and to and really to how can I say that? To make sure that what people are telling you, it's really, and the way you're going to discuss with them, you're going to interpret what they're saying the right way. And I've learned that by doing humanitarian, trying to do humanitarian on a regular basis. I strongly believe that if people who listen to us try from today to be more humble and loving every time they discuss with someone that they disagree with, that will going to change how people in this country talk about politics. And I would love to see humanitarian being applied all across the board, because it's changing my life. The fact that I second guess myself not so long ago, I think it's a healthy process, because I know that this is the way to go, and I'm committed to doing the right thing. And the right thing is to make this country better, to change the way we're doing politics. It's going to be the humanitarian way.
Thanks, Ismail. I'm just going to let that sit there. I think that's a beautiful way to wrap this up. And let's do another one of these soon. Thanks, Ismail. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.